Let me start straight away. Trump regret. We flew into the United States of America. A country still very much recovering from a hangover of the election of Donald Trump as president. A very deeply troubled country at war with itself. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the stages of grief, but America is somewhere between denial and depression at the moment. I think it's they call the frustration phase, where a lot of people in the music, film and media space are in complete denial about Donald Trump. They think things are still peachy and going life as usual, and then other people are literally just self-flagellating and kind of punishing themselves. How could we get it wrong? How is this happening? How are we going to survive? How are we going to live? And this theme was really kind of a golden thread that went throughout all the presentations that we saw. So the media in the States are undergoing massive self-reflection at the moment, and we attended a number of sessions, chiefly of which were from CNN and the New York Times, about how they're dealing with this moment. You guys will be familiar with Van Jones, the presenter on CNN, who was a very strong anti-Trump commentator during the elections, who had a very interesting session. What he basically said during this session is that the media in the US is no longer partisan, it's tribal, and that the conversation has shifted to right versus wrong, and that he's deeply concerned about that. We also listened to Carl Bernstein, the legendary Watergate journalist, one of the co-authors of the Watergate scandal, who called this the golden age for investigative journalism. I'll elaborate on that a bit more. And then to the New York Times executive editor, Dean Backwith, who said that the next 2 years will be a historic moment in the life of news organizations, and that there will be 20 books written about the next 2 years. So why is Van Jones so concerned about tribal journalism? Well, he's now started going back to these Rust Belt states that actually elected Donald Trump, and making the very basic point that I think a lot of United States American journalists missed, which is, why did people vote for Trump? We focus so much on Trump and who Trump is and how bad he is that we've forgotten that all these people voted for him. And this is such a basic part. I know it sounds very obvious for those of us who are journalists that, obviously that's what the questions you must ask, but it seems like America missed that and forgotten that. So he's now going back to these states trying to figure out why people were so disgruntled. And what he says is that the answers he's getting from real people who are not bad, people who don't remind him of Donald Trump, gives him a lot more empathy into why they voted for Trump. These are people, for example, old ex-miners who sit with lung cancer and who doesn't have a medical aid anymore. And when you start to listen to their stories, you finally get empathy. So Van Jones was pleading for more understanding from the journalists, more trying to understand people's choices than judging them, and moving from this narrative right to wrong. Practically for us, I think it's an important moment. We're at an inflection point in our politics in South Africa, and I think as journalists, it's very easy to fall into the good-bad narrative. Jacob Zuma is bad, Pravin Gordhan is good. That's too easy. We should always try to understand. If we can just slightly remind ourselves often that why do people, and ask these questions, why do people still support Jacob Zuma? Why is he still in power after all the scandals? Why is the land reform debate so hot again? Why do people still feel that, black people still feel that they haven't benefited economically from democracy? Those are the questions we should be asking rather than judging. Why do 700,000 people rock up to Bloemfontein on a weekend to listen to a farmer with a funny hat? Did we actually take that seriously enough? Did we ask the questions, or were we quickly to judge and run columns to say Angus Buchan is the worst person ever? Why is this happening? What does it tell us about our society? So I think there was poignant lessons for me there. Carl Bernstein, 70, I think 3 or 5 years old now, re-employed by CNN to run the investigative unit. People are reinvesting in investigative journalism because they're saying this is now a great time for investigative journalism, not only because of the storytelling mechanisms, but because this guy is president and we have to actually keep on tracking what's happening. Dean Backwith, New York Times, saying the New York Times, as you all know, is specified, is pointed out by Donald Trump on Twitter. He tweets about him, he calls him the enemy of the people. And Dean Backwith saying they're very concerned about this, but they cannot and they will not react to it by becoming opposition to Donald Trump, but rather to, quote, cover the hell out of Trump and Washington. And I think that's a nice way to think about our role as well, is rather than to judge, but to cover the hell out of government and the president. New York Times subscriptions, very interestingly, has gone up after the election. So there's a new appetite for true journalism, for credibility, for integrity. A very important time for us to build our brands as journalists in this regard. And And to get your integrity back, some of the tips that the New York Times has learned is to take your reader and your viewer into your journey, into how you produce journalism. Don't assume people trust us. Don't assume people think we are credible or regard us as experts. Show that to them. Kind of convince them of that. Bring them into our newsrooms physically. Bring them into our journeys of how we tell stories and increase our credibility that way.